Well, a very good Saturday morning. Thanks for joining us here on KION. Time for our expert segment to kick off the hour. And Luis Alvarez, CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, is with us. Good morning, Luis.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Doing well. We're going to talk about internet security today. A couple of interesting stories. We touched on one on Monday. We'll recap it this morning and then move on to a couple of other things. But in Forbes, there was an article about California's new online eraser law. And what exactly is the online eraser law, and what does it mean?
Well, this is a law that takes effect starting January 1st of 2015. So there's a year or so left before it comes into actual practice. But the intent was to allow young people who use, the internet as kind of a storage area for compromising pictures and comments and things that they may not want out there when they go into adulthood and start looking for jobs and don't want, potential bosses to see all this stuff.
Or applying
it gives
for
those
college.
kids or applying for college, yeah. It gives them, they call it the erase button, basically the option to get rid of all that information. And it requires that websites or manufacturers of apps that cater to minors have that functionality built into their applications so that people under 18 can remove their information when and if they want to. A great law probably in concept, but in execution still has some people scratching their heads.
Sure. The question I would ask, and this probably came to your mind as well, was, all right, so maybe they have to design this app to remove it from the particular website where it was originally posted. But then what do you do about that information if it ends up being reposted in other places? What does it have? Some type of search and destroy app within it that goes, sniffing about the rest of the web for this particular thing? And how would anything like that ever work or be designed?
You're asking one of the fundamental questions is, how do you make this work? Because the internet is not something that is simple as an application that you run on your PC. I mean, it's so interconnected and there's so many ways to take information and replicate it or duplicate it. What if you tweet something that then is retweeted? Well, the original tweet's easy enough to be removed. You can do that at any time. But in terms of the retweet, it's too late, baby. It's gone. It's out there in the wild. And we've seen that happen plenty of times. Politicians or celebrities post something and then realize that it looks really inappropriate, so they try to delete it. But by then it's too late. The internet it's gone viral. The internet, removing something from it is virtually impossible. So there's some, serious logistical issues there. But then comes if you're a provider of the services, how do you know somebody's really 18? I mean, if it's all self-identification, why wouldn't adults go in and do this just to be able to remove their data? So there's a lot of issues. And one of the good things, as I mentioned earlier, is that this law doesn't take effect for about another year and a half. So there is time to improve it and get feedback from industry on the right way to do this, if it's even possible.
I can imagine people from industry going to their legislators in Sacramento and saying, look, this is impossible. How do you expect us to do this? And the response they're going to get from some aide or from the legislator himself is something along the lines of, well, you guys are really smart. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, or, hey, it's really easy. Just put a button on that page that says delete.
Yeah, because in their world, there's no problem that can't be solved by passing a new law.
There you go.
Oh man!
And speaking of that, there are a few laws though that are taking effect. Governor Brown recently signed that I think are going to be beneficial, and they really have to do with internet security and protecting people's identity, which has become a very big issue recently, as you and I have spoken about many times in the recent past.
Security breaches and web tracking and limits on collection of data from public transit fare cards. What's all this about?
Well, the most interesting bill is it requires sites that capture information about users, including user IDs and passwords, to report if they ever have a breach.
Oh.
Right now, the reporting requirement is somewhat limited to regulated industries like healthcare or financial services, banks, those sorts of things. If they have a breach, they're required to report it and inform the users. But if you run a website, let's say you have an e-commerce site, and somebody hacks into it and steals a bunch of information, there's really nothing in California law that requires you to report that. Well, now there will be starting next year, and I think that's a consumer protection that's long overdue. And it's a requirement that will hopefully force people that are using websites for e-commerce and collecting information to tighten up their security. Some of the other the laws that will take effect have to do with the option that people have to not be tracked. There's folks out there that don't like having to be categorized or cookieized, as I say, when they travel to different websites. And websites have an option to allow users to not be tracked. Go to your Internet Explorer or Firefox, you have a button that you can push that says, "Don't let any websites track me." The question, though, is does the website respect that functionality, and this law will enforce that.
So we'll see what happens with that. Anything else that would be of interest to us that the legislator's working on or that we can see coming down the line, Lewis?
Well, California State Legislature is usually ahead of the curve when it comes to a lot of these laws and a lot of these concepts, because we tend to be, as the birthplace of the Silicon Valley, we tend to be a little bit more tech savvy than other states, and definitely more than the federal government. But I think some of these same laws, and especially laws around privacy and security, are going to start bubbling up at the federal level. We talked about CISPA, the Consumer Information Protection Act from I think last year. That thing, or some version of it, will come back in the next few months, I think, especially in light of all this NSA brouhaha and everything else that's going on with internet security. And it's really a time for us as a culture to try to understand, how do we balance privacy and access? And that's going to be a struggle for not just us as citizens, but the industry as a whole.
Lots of great information this week from Luis Alvarez, the Alvarez Technology Group. And, of course, if you want more information on their services, check them out online. It's alvareztg.com on the web. And there's the telephone number, the toll-free number for the I-Team. And Luis, what exactly is the I-Team, and how do we get in touch with them?
Well, the I-Team is our signature services offering, and you can call us at 866-78-I-Team. That's 866-784-8326, and we'll be happy to tell you more about it.
Luis, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great rest of the weekend.
You too, my friend.
Rest of the weekend.
You too, my friend.
Rest of the weekend.